Welcome to the Hunting Beast Report, a live video podcast with Dan Infalt and host Jeremy Gillespie.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Stealth Outdoors. The off-season's a great time to rehab your gear, so head on over to Stealth Outdoors at www.stealthoutdoors.com to pick up some climbing stick wraps, cam buckle covers, platform cable wraps, or stealth strip rolls for all of your miscellaneous silencing needs. Today's show is also made possible by Hunting Beast Gear, innovators in mobile hunting gear and the designers of the Beast Sticks and Beast Stand. Check out the latest products at www.huntingbeastgear.com. And now, on to the podcast. All right, we're live. Today we got Ashley Covert and Dan Infalt. Ashley, how are you? We got no sound for Ashley. It's funny, we were just talking to Ashley and it worked, so I don't know what about starting this makes it not work. But Dan, I can hear you. Ashley's going to rejoin. So you just returned from the Wild West, and we're going to recap your hunt today. But give me real quick we're going to talk about a lot of stuff, but give me your overall impressions of the hunt. And for people that haven't been on YouTube, you released, I believe, all the videos now, correct?
Yes, they're all out. Finally, I had some problems getting footage from everybody on time, which was a pain. Otherwise, I would have had this stuff done. The plan was to have it all out before bow season started here, and I ended up hunting a week and trying to edit at the same time, which was kind of a pain in the butt. But it was a fun hunt. It was funner than last time. I mean, we're learning some things, getting into some things. I'm not sure if everybody saw the whole series yet. The latest video dropped last night, which is the last video. It was kind of a good mix. I mean, what I really wanted to get out of this challenge was I wanted to get different people with different perspectives, with different ways of hunting, all going into a unique area and seeing what, techniques worked, what didn't, and how, in the end, a guy could combine all those. I tried to personally keep myself out of what other people were doing. I didn't want to know. I didn't want it to alter the way I did things. And I think it was pretty cool. It was fun video. So I went into it with the knowledge from last year. I had picked spots, I had found places, but what happens is when you hunt an area like that and you go in for a week and you've never been there and you're blind, when you find an area, you tend to blow it. You know what I mean? You get in there, you blow it up, and now you can't kill nothing there, but you're like, oh man, if I got another chance at this. And you think next year I'm coming in there and doing this. And what I found was, really for the most part, just by freak happenstance, the DNR there decided to do an invasive species removal, and cedars are considered invasive. And a lot of the areas I was hunting, it was cedars that I was hunting out of. It was, cedar trees were the best spots. And they went in and cut all those cedar trees out, even very remote, 3 to 5 miles back in, the cedar trees were cut down. And that made it tough. I mean, you get to a spot where you're expecting there to be a cedar tree, you're expecting to have a setup, and it's gone from last year. And the other thing was that the DNR there leases the public land to cattle ranchers. And there's probably a 50-50 chance that any particular property has cattle on it. And the deer and the cattle don't get along very well. So if you have all your hopes up in a spot that's got, and you get there and there's cattle in there, there's no deer in there, and you got it. And you might not know that until you walk 3 miles to get back there. So you need to leave for your hunt early enough that you can get back and get out and move to someplace else, which is not easy, because if you walk 3 miles, then you walk 3 miles back, there is nothing by the roads. Everything is deep in there. So it's almost impossible to regroup and go to a new area. So that kind of blew up what I was doing, but I still had a lot of, hope in the method that I was using. The one spot that I was really certain you could go to and a big buck would be there, there was one. And The reason I didn't kill it is because the cedar tree was missing. But I figured out a way to hunt it this time, and it doesn't include a cedar tree, so they're not going to cut it down. But we had already spooked them out, I believe. And then in the same scenario, same setup, there's so many deer around that Eric actually got a crack and shot one that we didn't recover. I felt real bad for Eric. He's been hunting hard for 2 years, and he finally gets his crack. And I think he probably should have just waited a little bit, and hopefully the deer would have turned. But he had a pretty good shot at holding behind the vitals. But I think that a little bit of the wind got him and stuff, because it was pretty windy, and his arrow didn't hit where he was aiming, and he got all meat, and that set him back a bit, Shane got a shot, and, everybody's talking about the footage Jacob got with the, he was on deer constantly, going back like 5 miles and stuff. And one thing is, I went back and looked at some of the spots that he looked at, and unbeknownst to him or whatever, but you go back there and you look at it and you walk, through 3 or 4 miles of sand. You come over this hill and there's a little pothole of cattails, not even any water, not a tree. I mean, what's the saying that wouldn't hold a jackrabbit in Wisconsin? Right. I wouldn't think there'd be a deer in it. Even if there was deer in this, 5 acres of cattails, if it gets up, where's it going to go? Where's it going to feed? So I looked at the stuff and just abandoned it. Where he sat and glassed that stuff, and what do you know? All these bucks pop out in the evening, or go in there in the morning. It's pretty crazy to see deer doing that. But if you go through the video, I mean, the only real crack that I seen him have that I thought was a good opportunity was at the very end, when he tried waiting for, sneaking up to where the deer bedded and waiting for it to move. I didn't think that was a bad ploy, but I think trying to chase them down or, creep up on them in terrain that, has grass that's ankle deep and wide open right in a tree is suicide. I think seeing what they do, sitting back and being patient, and the next day moving to where they did something, it might not pay off every day. They don't do the same thing every day, but they do it enough that eventually you'd get a crack, that would be my ploy. But those learned spots are good too.
Yeah. A couple takeaways for me. I watched all the videos, and I actually messaged Jacob online and told him, because I've got quite a bit of experience, 5 years now, whatever, hunting out west in that more type of terrain where it's a lot more open. There's just a lot less to work with. Antelope hunting, the same kind of stuff where, you're lucky if the grass is up to your knee. And what I've found is those bow mounted decoys can come in handy even early season. And it's not because they bring the deer in or they bring the antelope in, they don't. But if you can get close enough, like Jacob was when I think like a side-by-side drove in on him or something, that deer ended up coming towards him. If he would have been able to draw behind a decoy, this has happened to me a bunch. They just stop and they look at it. They know it's not quite right, but they don't know it's a person. And that's usually all the time you need. And you can move around too. So behind the decoy, even if you lift the decoy up and down while you're drawing your bow, doesn't really seem to spook them most of the time. And that's been a game changer for me. Like I said, it's not like you have deer or antelope run in, you don't, but it does give you a shield to draw. And that's huge in those kind of scenarios. So I think maybe next time he goes, he'll have one of those along. I would, if I was him.
Yeah. We almost brought you. You almost came.
Yeah. Yeah.
Things came up and you couldn't make it, but that would have been interesting. That would have been an interesting take in the series. Yeah.
So maybe if next time you guys get out for an early season hunt, whether it's Nebraska or somewhere else, I'd definitely like to tag along. Maybe that's a good segue, Dan. Didn't work out this year because I had already taken a bunch of time off to elk hunt, and I half got my first elk this year. I can't say I fully got it, but I can here, I'll bring up some pictures real quick. Maybe give a rundown on this story because it's on the thumbnail. People are probably wondering. So would have been Friday the 13th of all days. In the evening, well, it was pretty early in the afternoon. I spotted a group of elk from where I was glassing from, and they were kind of bedded down in a little ravine. So I made a loop to get the wind right, got the wind right, and I was creeping through some timber towards this group of elk. Well, on my way, it had rained a day or two before. On my way, it was real quiet, and I was taking my time because, again, my experience is it's the elk or the deer you don't see when you're spotting stalking that usually get you. So I was glassing, moving up 10, 15 yards, glassing. It was early. It was like 2:30 in the afternoon, so real early. Most of the elk were bedded. Well, I must have snuck right up on a bedded one, and I don't know if he saw me or heard me, but I looked to my left, and there was this bull standing 38 yards away. So I was behind a tree. I did have one of those decoys on. He looked at me. I drew behind the tree and then stepped out with the decoy. Shot. You can see the shot here. I could see after I hit him, he took 2-3 big bounds and kind of looked around. I could see half my arrow sticking out, I would say. And it was quartering too slightly, which is why I tucked it right on the shoulder. But I shoot it like a 29, 28-inch arrow, and roughly half of it was sticking out. So I got somewhere between 12 and 16 inches of penetration. The bull walked 50 yards, kind of stopped for a second. I was like, oh, he's going to tip over right here. Done deal. And then it kept walking, and I lost sight of it. So I waited a full hour because I didn't hear him crash. So I waited a full hour and walked up to where he took off, found the tracks, no blood there. I had a real good landmark where I saw him last. I kind of zigzagged up to where I saw him last, didn't pick up any blood at all. And I was like, what the heck? I couldn't make any sense of it. So, and I'm a pretty decent tracker. I've tracked a lot of animals and I've recovered some animals on 800,000 yard tracks where I didn't have much to go on. So I feel pretty confident there. And so I move up about another 50 yards, kind of doing little loops, looking for blood. And I look uphill and I see this bull through the timber. And I know it's him because I glass him and I can see the wound. I can see the arrow sticking out still at this point, and just a little bit of blood, like kind of where it's at right here, seeping down. So I waited another hour and a half, went up to where the last landmark was, again, zigzagging all the way, looking for blood. I had him pinned within a 5-yard, maybe 10-yard area. Looked all over in there. Nothing, couldn't find it. And then it got dark and didn't have any blood to go on. Oh, and an important point I want to make is the last time I saw him, he was walking due west. So the next morning I ran into a guy at the trailhead. He's like, hey, you mind if I hunt? I'm like, yeah, that's public land. I don't care, right? I said, but I did hit a bull last night. I'm going to look for it again this morning. And really nice guy. He's like, you want me to help you look? It's like, sure, it's great. And if we run into one on the way, if you're the shooter, shoot away. So we went out that morning, got into elk again. He didn't end up getting a shot, but we looked for another 2 or 3 hours that morning. He couldn't find any blood either. I gave him my number and I said, hey, I'm going to be around the rest of the weekend. This was Saturday. If you find it, give me a call. So, okay. So Sunday morning, I get a text from this guy. It says, I found your bull. And this is where he found it. Died in the opening. And unfortunately, because it had been 40 hours at this point too. The meat was all bad. So I called the game warden. I reported it, and the guy said, the game warden, if you want to take the antlers, you can tag it. So I ended up tagging it. But when I got to it, people are asking some of my friends and stuff, oh, what happened with the shot? It was so stinky by the time I found it, I couldn't bring myself to cut it open. It was really bad because it was probably 75 degrees during the day. It sat out a day and a half at this point. So it was really right. But anyways, people are probably going to ask a lot of questions like my arrow weight and the shot distance and all that stuff. So it was 38 yards. I hit pretty much exactly where I was aiming. I shoot a 480 grain arrow, fixed blade head, QAD Exodus with the 50 grain insert. So I got pretty good FOC and all that stuff. I honestly have no idea what happened. I don't know if I hit shoulder blade going in. Like I said, it was quartering slightly. If it didn't get far enough in to get the offside lung or what, but at the shot, I expected the thing to be dead within a minute. And I kind of reconstructed the route. I think he went on Onyx, and it was about 1,000 yards, which I don't know, Dan, you chime in, but that's pretty consistent with the one lung hit from what I've seen. And you can see obviously right there was lung blood, but didn't find a single drop of blood. The other guy I was with didn't find any blood. So I don't know. Bummed out about it. Really nice bull. Didn't get any meat.
One lung.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, that's
I think in hindsight, maybe if you held a little bit further back, because if you got guts or liver or whatever, you're going to kill it and you're going to find it.
Right.
But a little bit further the way you're going and you're in shoulder for sure. I don't know that if you're quartering at all, I don't think you got shoulder blade. I think you probably just got heavy meat.
Yeah, and that's.
Did you hear a crack or anything?
Yeah, I kind of did hear like a crack. And the other thing that makes me, Dan, I don't know if this happened to you on deer, but I've shot a few deer in like what people call the vital V, like through the shoulder blade meat, but not in the shoulder, but right next to it. And I've had really bad blood trails on those because I think the shoulder meat keeps a lot of the blood from coming out, and I think that's probably what happened here because man, I looked so hard that night and the next morning, and I could not find a single drop of blood, which is crazy on a lung shot. So yeah, anyways, that's my sad story. I got probably 5 years. No, not probably. I got 5 full years, and I'd hate to even guess. I bet you conservatively 400 miles of hiking into shooting an elk. And then that was the results. Like so close. It was, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I'm pretty bittersweet, really.
Yeah. I mean, it could be worse. You could have not recovered it or found a headless elk.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
It could be worse, but it could be a lot better. I mean, all you can do is use that stuff to improve, everybody has bad hits. Everybody has things that happen, but those that don't learn from them are the problem. As long as you're learning from what happens and you're moving forward, and I mean, there's nothing more you can ask for.
Oh yeah, real quick.
This is my question.
Go ahead.
Did you learn anything like overall just from the elk hunt in general? Not necessarily thinking about the shot placement or anything, but just from the hunt.
Yeah. Before I get into that real quick, the last time I saw the bull, and I said I saw it uphill, it was maybe 200 yards from where I originally shot it. It was going due west. And from that point where I looked for blood the last time and gave up on it Friday night when it got dark, it was about 500 to 600 yards due east. So the last good information I had to go on with no blood trail was that it was headed west. And that night I could hear elk going that way. So I spent 80% of my search effort, that way. And it turns out that wasn't the right area to be searching. So just kind of a weird deal all the way around. But Ashley, what did I learn? I hunted this area the last year, and I learned a lot last year. I had some really close opportunities. Actually had a shot or two last year that didn't pan out. So I was feeling super confident if those elk were in the area this year, kind of like Dan going back to Nebraska, that I learned a bunch about how they travel through the area, how they were using it, and what I needed to do. So I felt real confident. And the biggest takeaways were get to know your area. I've been hunting this same area for 3 of the 5 years. So getting to know it pretty well now, and things are starting to come together. And I do feel like it's a draw area. So you can't get the tag every year. But if I do get the tag again next year, I feel like it's going to happen all the way 100% next year. Dan, what about you? We touched on Nebraska, but takeaways. I'd like to know, was it harder than you thought it was going to be? Because I know you're feeling pretty confident, but something that you ran into that I run into a lot out here is pasture and cattle rotation. And I've got spots that when there's no cattle in there, they can be red hot, and the next year they're dead. And obviously getting your trees cut down didn't do you any favors. So what was it like going back and maybe finding out, even though you were in the same area or areas, that things were different than you might have anticipated?
You always believe you can be successful. I don't know. At least I do. If I don't have that belief, I don't have the confidence. I'm not going to even get into anything. So I have to believe in myself, and I always do. Whether I fail or I succeed, I believe in myself. Some of it was harder, like the getting out to the spot and finding out it's not all that great. But I kind of had an inkling that could happen. That happens to me all the time back home, not because there's cattle, but hunters or whatever. I just went to a spot yesterday that, I am with my good spots. I might hunt them once a year, once every couple of years. I try to keep them fresh. Well, this spot was kind of like it's parkish. It's like a park. I don't want to tell too much or people figure it out, but but it's a spot that has an access for something other than hunting, but it's owned by the DNR. And a lot of people don't realize that it's huntable land. And I always kind of had that to myself. And it's right in a neighborhood that hunting's allowed, but there's ritzy houses around it and really big bucks. So I never killed anything there. I've only hunted it a few times. But I went there yesterday with a good wind and thought I'd give that a try. And got in there and the whole parking lot was full of trucks. I've never seen guys hunt there ever before. And then I thought, well, maybe they're missing the spot by the road here. And I walked in there and there's trail cameras on every other tree. So I was like, I'm out of here.
Yeah.
But so I'm used to, spots, getting blown up or failing or something going wrong or, some kid makes a fort there or something. You never know what's going to happen. So I kind of expect that to some degree. I didn't expect it to be cattle per se, but it is what it is. And, I still expected success. One thing that got me was I planned on doing more. There's certain spots I wanted to hit that I didn't. In one of the spots, fairly certain if I could have gotten there in the morning, I could have been successful. But the biggest downfall, the biggest mistake I made, and Eric would be really quick to tell you this, was that I tried to pick a spot to stay at. I was going to camp, but then we just decided in the hot weather, I didn't want to sit out in the baking sun. You know what I mean? So we decided to get a building, and then we decided, and I like camping because you can just get up and move. You know what I mean? Especially if it's like government camping where it's free. You can just anytime say, well, I'm hunting over that way. I'm going that way, but when you rent a house for $1,000, you're going to stay there. And, it was right in the middle in between where Ricky wanted to hunt and where we wanted to hunt, me and Eric. And I thought it would be about an hour drive for us, which is pretty much, but it turned out to be about an hour and a half drive to most of the spots.
Yeah.
And it don't sound like a lot, but when you drive an hour and a half that way to hunt, you walk an hour to an hour and a half in because you're hunting so deep, walk an hour and a half out, and then, traverse back to the house, get something to eat. And pretty soon it's 1 o'clock. And then you're not getting up at 3 to drive that hour and a half back to walk that hour and a half to get to a spot to hunt in the morning. And it kind of put us out of the game for mornings, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
Eric, towards the end, he just took off when camped out in the hills, and the last few hunts he did, which more power to him. I should have probably did the same. But that kind of put a damper on it. I would not do that again. If I went there again, I'd be camping.
Yeah.
I'd be camping real close to where I hunt.
That's a good tip. Out here, Montana, obviously there's not that many towns that you can stay in. One, it's expensive. And Dan, I realize you guys are just there for a week or whatever, but for me, I'd sleep in my truck 90% of the time for that reason, because it's like a lot of the areas I hunt are an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours from any place with a hotel. So it's, if you can be mobile, and a lot of guys do tent and stuff anymore, just for exactly what you said, Dan. Every minute I'm messing around with a room or a tent is a minute I'm not sleeping. So, and I like to hunt mornings. That's something I want to talk to you about too, is mornings early season. I don't hunt as many mornings in October, but early September I do. And it seems like, I think it was Jacob's video, or what was the guy that was with Shane? I forget his name. Carpenter?
Yeah, it's Ryan Carpenter.
It seems like those guys are glassing in the morning, and even if you don't hunt in the morning, to have an idea where the deer end up is pretty helpful, or to see how they're traveling in the morning, how you might expect them to come out in the evening. So I do a lot.
100 degrees, those deer are moving better in the morning than they are in the evenings.
That's the other point.
So that early season can be good morning hunts if it's really hot. And it was really hot and arid there. And the evening movement was, even the evening movement was pretty good. I mean, for whatever reason, they were getting up before the sun was even down. But the mornings seemed better and seemed to last longer. And I think that's because in the mornings it was cool. It wasn't 110 degrees,
I agree. No, I have the same thing with the elk. The morning hunts in September are generally much better because depends on the day, but I was having weather between 40 to 60 in the morning, and opening weekend in the afternoon, it was like 92 degrees. So I skipped Sunday. It must have been the 8th. I skipped the afternoon because it was just so hot. And yeah, I knew the elk were still going to move, but I was over it already at that point. 92, 94, when you're hiking a couple miles, not enough of that.
Mm-hmm.
Ashley, you got any questions for Dan about Nebraska? Put you on the spot here.
Like personal questions?
Yeah.
Or
I don't know if you
questions
had a chance
for
to watch
people?
any of the videos or no,
I
personal.
have not had a chance to watch it. I haven't had a chance to watch it. I'm struggling with getting ready. I decided last minute I was going to change everything up. And so, yeah, here I am.
I did see some social
What'd you
media
change up?
posts that you were looking for maybe some new camo and some boots and stuff like that.
Yeah, well, my bow, I wanted to go back to the carbon rose because that's the first one that I had, and it's the main one that I felt comfortable with. And where I wasn't shooting for that long before I switched up, I don't think I ever really got comfortable enough to actually switch. And I picked that one up and was really good at it really quick. And then any other bow I've touched, I struggle with. So I haven't been shooting for a while, and I'm waiting on that to come in. And then our season starts this weekend, and then I finally tried my camo on because I didn't want to, and per doctor's orders I gained weight, but now my camo doesn't fit, so I'm on the struggle bus this year, and I'm like avoiding hunting stuff because I'm like I'm behind and I don't want to think about it, and this is too much.
It wasn't doctor's order, but my camo is usually a little tight starting every year too.
When you wear what you wear every day, it's never a problem.
It's too cold here for that. It gets way too cold. And it's called Raynaud's. So like my blood doesn't flow properly and my hands and my feet get really cold. Mm-hmm. So I wear like Justin's big old puffy Arctic shields and stuff over my boots because I can't do cold. It's one of the hardest things for me.
I've got
Even
a friend.
at this time of year?
Do what?
Even at this time of the year?
This time of the year, it's not too bad. It's still pretty hot over here in West Virginia. Like once it gets into, and it depends. It doesn't dip that low too often, but once it gets into like the 20s and stuff, it's not very good for my hands. Like I can't move them very well, which is weird because I came from Washington and we got in the negatives and it never happened there. But last year, I don't know, it just started happening and then I learned about it and I guess it's a thing.
I've got a friend that's got the same thing, and the circulation, her feet and hands are always cold too. Like when normally you wouldn't be that cold at 50 or 40 degrees. She's usually freezing.
Right. No,
Yeah.
last year it made me cry. I felt like the biggest baby. I was like, why am I crying? Because my hands hurt. It was a pain I have not felt though.
I cut off one of my fingers and I had it sewn back on the tip here.
Oh.
And that doesn't get enough blood circulation, and that'll freeze on me real quick.
So you kind of get it then.
Just one little finger though.
Yeah, not all your fingers and toes.
Yeah, usually it gets down to 20. I'll put something on that finger and I'll wear a second t-shirt.
I don't know how you do it. I would freeze to death. It gets below 60 and I'm like, I need a parka and a gas heater, please.
Yeah. Kind of hard to fit one of those in the tree stand or the saddle.
Yeah. That's the one downfall to hunting like that, because I've always hunted out of a blind, and hunting out of trees like you guys do it, like the men do it, it takes a lot.
Well, Dan, I got one more question for you for Nebraska before we move on, and then we'll talk about what's going to go on with Wisconsin. But, well, I guess one other thing. We talked about this before, and I think you said you'd do it, so I'll put Dan on the spot. We didn't go over this before, but Dan, this is episode number 50, if you can believe that, of the Beast Report. So I think you said you were going to give away like a T-shirt or a hoodie or something, right?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, okay. So what do we got?
Can pick one thing out from what we got in stock.
Yeah.
For either T-shirts or hoodies. So whoever you have for winter.
So Ashley, you're gonna help me out with this. Make sure I don't miss a number. We got 250 people on right now. So pick a number 1 to 250. It'll be the first one to pick the exact number if there's more than one. And if we don't have an exact pick, we'll go the closest one to it without going over. So per usual.
How many guesses do they
just
get?
One guess too. Yep, just one guess. So I've got the number already down here, so we'll wait and see. And Dan, so what if and when you go back to Nebraska, what will you do different next time? What'd you learn on this trip? Because I know you learned a bunch the first one. What'd you learn on this trip, and what do you think you personally would do different going back?
I did learn some really good rut spots. I ran into some spots that I thought, man, if I was sitting here in rut, I'd kill one for sure. So I wouldn't mind giving that a shot, maybe. And I still got a tag in my pocket, and I'm going to be in Kansas around rut, which is pretty close to Nebraska.
Turns out it's not that far away.
Right. So I might be back. But as far as if I went back in early season, I think I would do things the same. However, I'd be probably camping closer to where I was hunting, and I'd be glassing in the mornings more. I don't think I would get up and chase these deer around. I would observe them, see what they do, and make a plan. But I'm the kind of guy who likes the cat and mouse game, you know. I think stalking is kind of hit or miss, and you can kind of ruin an area really quick. And there's only so many spots. When you get in there, I mean, literally, I don't think we could have stayed another week. We wouldn't have had that much success because I think we burned through most of the good spots, honestly.
Yeah.
There's not a lot. I mean, so you don't want to kill a spot, but in my opinion, you know, chasing the deer around. And take that with a grain of salt because it's just not my cup of tea. I don't like that. I really, it's just not fun for me to go stalk deer. It would be kind of like, I don't know, pheasant hunting or something to me. To me, that chess game is what really turns me on. And I'm not knocking anything. I'm just saying that I know what I want for me, you know, what I like, what I enjoy. And for me, the enjoyment is, and that's not to say if a deer popped up in front of me, I wouldn't shoot it. I'm just saying that that's not something I really dream of, going sneaking up on a deer or something. I like, and the thing that gets my mind rolling is watching this deer, watching what it's doing, coming up with a game plan. You know, did it go through a gate? Is that a narrow spot? Can I go sit by that gate as a funnel and get him tomorrow? Is he going to take the same route? Is he doing something where there's a kink in his armor where I can kill him? And I think that sitting back and looking at him with a spot and scope too is kind of nice because you can look at these deer and you can judge them, and there's no pressure. So you can see a deer that's say, 140-ish or something, and you can say, do I want to shoot that animal?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or if you're sitting in a tree and it walks out, a lot of times it gets shot and you're like, I probably shouldn't have shot that, but it happened fast, but when you get to watch them and see them and stuff, you can say, okay, I'd take that one, or that one. If the rest of them come through, I'm letting them go. And then when you go in there, you're kind of locked to what you know what to expect. So I like that. And I like the idea of picking them off. The trouble with it is there's not real good hiding spots, but I would rather hide in ankle-high grass than try to stalk in it. I'd rather try to find a way to find one little bush to hide behind, a little hill to slip behind, a way to lay down on the grass and, be able to get to my knees and take a shot. I was finding it fairly easy to set up in the yellow flowers that were out there. We're down in the low stuff. Actually, in the sand was kind of tough. But there was plenty of grasses and stuff set up on the ground down in where the deer were hanging pretty good. So I'd probably do that. But when I didn't see a deer in the morning, or my morning wasn't going well, or I didn't see a target, I'd fall back on those pre-scouted spots. So if I got onto something, and it was hot, I'd go hunt it. But I could always fall back on one of those pre-scouted spots if I had nothing going on. That's probably how I would do it.
No, a lot of good takeaways there. It kind of echoes what I've figured out over the years hunting here early season. I do probably a little more spot and stock than definitely you do. Mm-hmm. Maybe not quite as much as Jacob's doing, but what I've had good luck with is, I don't know, it depends. We always say it depends on the situation, but like after I got the elk this past weekend, I was out and I've got a mule deer I've got my eye on that comes onto public land, but he hangs out on private a lot. Well, I ended up seeing the deer, maybe 45 minutes before the end of legal. He was 600 yards away. I managed to close about 400 yards. So then I was 200 yards away, but I didn't have hardly any cover left. It was kind of in an open CRP type field. And there was one little knob in there. So I hold up on the backside of the knob. And at that point, instead of forcing it, you just kind of have to let, and this is my experience, you have to let whatever is going to happen. Sometimes that deer comes within range. Sometimes he doesn't. Well, this particular one ended up getting as close as 87 yards. And it was kind of funny when I looked at the map afterwards. I banged my head off the wall a little bit because, and that's something in real time when you're stalking a deer, you don't always make perfect decisions. But I could see there was a little terrain feature that after the fact I should have known, and I could have moved maybe 50 yards closer, and then I would have had a shot, but I didn't. But my whole point of the story is, I think when you get that close, and again, situation dependent, 80 yards, 150 yards. A lot of times you just have to wait them out and hope they help you out. And a lot of times they don't. But the good news is I didn't bust that deer. My wind was good. He just ended up feeding off. And by the time it was dark, he was 400 yards away. I waited for it to get dark and slipped out of there.
Yep.
And while we're talking about all my sad hunting stories, so I didn't shoot at that deer. Like I said, 87 yards too far. I did some antelope hunting the next day. So I like to antelope hunt in the middle of the day when the deer aren't doing anything. I've got an archery only tag, and I got a shot at an antelope buck at about 45 yards, but it was real windy. And I had one of those decoys on. Those things, the one downside I will say about those is when it's windy, they catch a lot of wind, and oh yeah, makes shooting your bow harder. So I whiffed on that one, clean miss. So it's been having fun though. Been having fun.
I'll take a clean miss any day.
Same. Well, we talked about Nebraska quite a bit. For people that haven't got a chance, check out the videos. 4-part series, I believe, right, Dan?
Yes.
Yeah, a lot of good information, especially for people that are thinking. We've talked about this a lot. We don't need to beat the dead horse here, but early season, I think, Dan, and I know you agree, one of the best chances all year to shoot a really mature buck. And for people that are looking to do maybe a travel hunt where they don't want all the pressure, I imagine you guys didn't see hardly any other bow hunters at all, did you?
No. And one thing I did notice is that when we did get the good spots that were back there where you could get in a tree, it amazed me that these trees were like set up perfect for hunting, and you could see nobody ever hunted in them because of the way the branches were and stuff. You could see nobody ever set up there, and it was like, wow. I mean, if anybody's bow hunting out there, they're ground hunting.
Yeah.
I don't think anybody's really getting in a tree. And I hear people going, well, those deer don't go near trees or avoiding trees. I didn't see that. I saw them actually bedding by the trees because of the shade and stuff. They were trying to get under the trees and get out of the sun. It had nothing to do with bow hunting pressure because nobody's bow hunting out of those trees. I mean, now when we got down by where Ricky was hunting, there was bow hunting pressure. You could see sign, you could see garbage and stuff laying around. And that's another thing about Nebraska. I mean, it makes Wisconsinites look like pigs, or even Midwesterners, anywhere you go around here. There wasn't any garbage on the side of the roads anywhere. There's no garbage on the public lands, no garbage those people really respect their property. I really like that.
Yeah, Montana's the same way. You hardly ever see trash in the woods or on the roadways even at all, which, again, yeah, it's nice.
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about Wisconsin. You're back. I think you got all of your editing done from the Nebraska hunt now. Not to say that you're not making other videos, but what's the season look like? We're already, week and a half in for you. Have you had any action, and what's your plan? Because we talked about this a lot too, Dan. The first couple of days are real good, and then it seems like every week the season kind of changes. So today's the 24th of September. What kind of action?
We're starting to lose that early September edge. Right?
Yeah. So what kind of action have you had, and what are you doing going forward?
Well, it's been interesting. I mean, like usual, I don't have a lot of action at this time of the year. I mean, I see some deer, but I don't really consider, I consider seeing a spike or a forkhorn or a doe like seeing a squirrel, or a bunny, but I have been getting onto some deer. I've narrowed my focus down into about 3 or 4 core areas. I got one spot where people were telling me about a real big buck crossing a road. Threw a camera in there. I got a picture of it, and it's a good one. So I'm focusing on him a little bit. That's a hard one. but I know where he's at, and I'm waiting for the right winds, and I'm going to go after him a little bit. And then one area that I tried to I started hunting there last year, never hunted there before that. I went in there to hunt this year, and it's you got to walk a ways to get to the huntable property, and it's there's some trees, and everybody that bow hunts there hunts by those trees, and those trees are where this big, thick, nasty area of buckthorn that nobody goes into really dumps off into a cornfield or bean field, and the people that do hunt that edge of the corn. But there hasn't been any pressure yet. Going back there, I can't find any signs of people hunting yet. Doesn't mean nobody's been in there, but I can't see any signs of it. I went there on a Saturday. There was not a car in the parking lot. There wasn't one when I left. There wasn't none when I got there. And it's a little tiny parking area, So, anywho, going back on that edge between the brush and the cornfield, I ran into a cluster of rubs. And all the rubs were from this year. Some of them were dried up from like when the deer first came out of velvet. Some of them were tacky. And one of these rubs was still bleeding. And all the rubs were waist high. And obviously it was a big deer that did this. And he was breaking in half trees as big around as like a shovel handle. He was breaking them with his antlers, which tells me it's a strong deer. And you could tell that an older deer did that, probably at least a 3-year-old, I would say, which is going to be a shooter around here. So I looked at that and I contemplated. And I know from scouting that 2 seasons ago that there's good bedding not too far in from these rubs, but you couldn't really see the tracks real well, but I know kind of you can see the trail direction. You can know where he's coming from. But I know that hunting it last year, me, my son, and a buddy threw some hunts in that area, and we never even so much as saw a doe up close to the crop field. So it tells me I'm thinking that deer's coming from further back. But in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, this year it's corn. Last year it was beans.
Big difference there.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah.
And beans at this time are brown. They're not being eaten. Corn is. Deer will hold up close to it. And there's not the pressure. When we started hunting it last year, there's a little more pressure. So I was kind of hee-hawing around about throwing a hunt right there. And I thought, no, you know what? I'm going to go back to the spot I'm expecting, because what happened last year is when I went back in, I found a funneling area back in these buckthorn where I found a tree I could get in, and all the trails kind of went hourglass near this tree. And when I got back there, I actually seen deer. I seen quite a few deer heading up towards those crops. I never saw a shooter, but I saw a lot of deer go through there. So I thought, I'm going to get to that position. So I went a roundabout way to get back there, and going back there, I started running some really big tracks not far from that those rubs. Very large deer tracks. And I just kind of ignored them, walked up, and I was still on kind of the trail, like the trail that goes back there. And the trail had taken like an L shape, and I'm going down that L shape, and there's a point where I have to cut in and do a 90-degree to go to the tree I want. So what I basically do is I circle the whole property so that I'm not blowing the deer out of there and I'm coming in with the wind right. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I'm actually walking way out of my way. So I'm actually going to hook back in. And when I hook back in, I'm probably 100 yards from that rub cluster in the direction the trails come from. And I get about 50 feet off of the trail on a 90-degree angle. And I hear something behind me, and I turn around, and there's this big old buck getting up with a really nice rack. And he just trotted. He didn't run hard, but he trotted across the trail and onto private. And I'm like, should probably sat just in from those rubs.
Yeah.
But hindsight's 20/20, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. Tell me about it this year.
I went back to where that funnel was, and there was no sign of deer really going through there. There was a couple of tracks and stuff, which tells me the buck was up front. And I saw the buck, and I'm pretty sure that's the buck that left that rub. I don't think there's a lot of bucks back there. He's probably the buck I'm hunting. So The good part is, got my eyes on them, and that's not too healthy for a deer like that to let me see him, because now I've got a mission. So I'm onto that buck. I'm onto the buck that I got the picture of that I was told about crossing the road. And now last night, the wind wasn't right for that spot, and I was running a little late with some work stuff, and I ran to that spot I told you about where it's kind of park-like, and all of a sudden now everybody figured it out, and there's 4 cars there, right? So on a whim, I just ran back to a spot where I usually see 1 or 2 good ones quite often, but it's a heavily pressured area, but it's vast. I went out there and I went to a spot I haven't hunted in a couple of years, but I have some history with. I've killed a few bucks there. And I get back to it, and the sign's all dried up. And there doesn't seem to be much browse or anything. But I'm not letting that deter me. I set up and I hunt anyways, knowing that it just takes one deer to be going through there. And it's got the terrain and the habitat to hold a big buck. And it's got, quite a bit of bedding. And it all comes to this point. So I'll give it a shot. So I set up anyways. I sat there right till dark. Didn't see a thing. Didn't hear a thing. Nothing moved. So I get down and I come out. And when I went in, I was running late because of the other spot and stuff. So I kind of went in a roundabout way because there was a whole bunch of cars in the parking lot. And I didn't want to walk under somebody and have them see where I was going. So I went through a swamp to get there. But when I left, I just beelined it straight for the truck. So I went through this little swamp and up onto an island. And I was going to go across the island through a swamp to a trail and then back to the truck. And I go through that little swamp and up onto the next island, which is basically the trail that comes out of the bedding I was hunting. And when I come up out of that swamp, in my headlamp, I come up on this rub that's fresh, that is on a tree about this big around, as big as my waist, basically. And the rub, the bared section of the tree where the bark is rubbed off, is all above my belt.
Oh, wow.
And it had tine marks over my head that I had to look up at. If I was in elk terrain, I would say no way was that a whitetail.
I was just going to say, sounds like the rubs I was seeing in the elk woods.
Right,
yeah.
Right. I mean, really, literally, if that was elk terrain, I'd swear it was an elk rub. So I got excited about that. There's no elk around here, by the way. That kind of let me know. It's the kind of rub where I don't care what that deer looks like. That's a shooter.
Yeah.
Just based on age and such, but the height of that. So that's an area I know really well. I know all the bedding really well. I know it like the back of my hand. So I'm going to spend some time in there. So now I've got 3 potential victims I'm going to start working on. And I'm going to start narrowing my focus, which is what I do. I throw a net out there early season. And then the net gets some holes in it. You know what I mean? And there's some spots where there's still some fish, right?
Yeah.
And you start seeing what everything looks like, and you just kind of narrow your focus on, okay, this property has one, that one has one. Anybody out there, and I guarantee you, probably the majority of the people listening to us right now, you can't beat it into their heads, but they tend to always hunt the same properties. That's not this guy. Because those big bucks are not on the same properties every year. You got to go find those big bucks. Sure, there's some properties that generally have big bucks. And I'll throw a lot of hunts at those, and I'll throw some stuff at them. But if you want to find a really big buck and you want to kill a really big buck, you got to hop around a little bit until you find one and narrow the focus and hunt them down. Because they stay in an area. I mean, they don't go running around. I mean, if you bump a 2-year-old, that thing might run 5 miles and relocate. They're a whole different animal. Those big ones will move around underneath your footsteps. They'll move around you. They stay in the areas. I can hunt that area down and I'll kill that animal if I don't run out of time.
Yeah, Dan, it's a good story to illustrate something that you preach all the time, and I think people overlook it or misinterpret the message, especially people that are newer to your style of tactics. But not to say you won't just ever hunt one buck, but you're saying right now you're on to 3. and you're going to narrow in, but that doesn't mean you're going to hunt the exact same spot you've seen or hunted those 3. You're going to bounce around within, and feel free to elaborate here, but a 10-acre, 40-acre, 80-acre area, you're going to hunt a different spot every time, but you're going to be around where you've had those encounters or where that sign's at right now.
You better believe that I came out of that woods. I got out my mapping system. I started looking around. Where could he be? You start going further and further and further in your circle, and you're like, okay, there's this many spots he could be. There's hunters over here. There's hunters over there. There's a beat trail going into this spot. There's thumbtacks going over there. Where are these hunters not getting? Well, there's this section here of cattails. It's vast that nobody's going into. How could he be coming out of that and not being detected? How could he be coming over here? What's going on over here? So now I'm going to go to those spots one after another. And really, what people don't get is a lot of it is planned areas. A lot of places, like I got a spot. If he's bedding in here, I got a set up. A lot of it's not. A lot of it's like, okay, if I think he's in here, I think he could be coming in and out over here. I'll take a walk over there. I'll take a look. Any sign coming out of this section, any sign coming out of that section. And I'm literally going to hunt that area down. I'm going to eliminate the stuff that people are hunting. Deer do not get to be the size that left that rub by going where people hunt. He'd be dead. A deer with antlers like that, I don't care what anybody's got in their hands, they're shooting at it. Half the guys are poaching. Whether it's squirrel hunting, they shoot at it. People out there seem crazy. So to me, that buck is survived that amount of time because he's hunting the hunters. So what I have to do is figure out, well, if he's survived, what has he found that these guys are missing? And that really narrows it down to kind of certain areas he could be in, and I'll throw hunts at that. And what that means too, that a lot of people won't get, is that when I go hunt these spots, I'm going to be hunting spots in a lot of cases that don't have very much sign. Sometimes I find sign and it really gets me excited because it's coming out where there's, where I expect them to be. But sometimes I'm going to throw a hunt at a spot where there ain't much sign because I'm only hunting one deer. That deer might not be laying sign coming through there. I don't need a herd. I don't need somebody to hold my hand and say, did you see the little bucks here? You saw a deer. Okay, Danny. That's like seeing squirrels. Little deer are an annoyance that spook big deer. What I'm after is a big buck. So I could go 50 hunts in a row and not see a deer, and I don't give a crap. But a lot of people, they need that. They need to see that deer as like a pacifier. That's not even the same animal. These big bucks are going to live in a niche where they've learned how to avoid people. And other deer might not be on that pattern. They might be hitting the food sources. They might be walking where everybody hunts. There's a reason why people will tell me that, I have people that live around here. They'll tell me, oh, I seen 5 bucks today. I've seen 6 yesterday, and they'll see all these deer. They'll come back with pictures and video and all this stuff, but they never see a big one. I don't see as many deer as they see, not even a fraction of what they see. But probably 1 out of 3 that I see is a good one.
Yeah, that's the difference. And Dan, your story earlier made me think, you said this year you had a setup where you went back and there wasn't a sign, but you knew that area because of the terrain and stuff could hold a big buck. Isn't that pretty similar to, I know you weren't on that buck last year. You didn't know about it, but wasn't it last year when you shot that really nice buck that you'd known that previously there was a deer in, but I think I remember you saying the sign was kind of dried up and you didn't have a ton of confidence based on sign alone, but you hunted it anyways.
In that spot, I spring scouted. I hunted an area. I saw activity further in. I couldn't tell what it was, but I could tell there was bucks moving around further in. And I waited till after the season. And in springtime, I scouted over there and found where that deer was potentially moving, made a setup, and I didn't go back until last year. And when I went in there, I was really disappointed because it didn't look like when I scouted. There was no sign. There was no rubs. There was no scrapes. I really couldn't. You could see some trails, but they're dried up. There wasn't much for tracks. And I really didn't expect much. But all there has to do is be one deer. And I trusted in my scouting. And it got me a 170-inch buck. Yeah.
So don't be afraid to go out on a limb sometimes, and especially if the area's got everything a big buck needs. So, Dan, I think we're going to have – oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that happens a lot.
Yeah.
There's that one nice buck I was hunting. I couldn't figure out where he was. This is a long time ago. But sometimes the ones a long time ago stick in my mind better because was a big deal back then. But this particular buck, I had some pictures of him. I had some sightings of him at night, glassing them and stuff with a spotlight. But I could never see him in daylight. And I'm like, where the heck is this thing? So I took and I graphed out the property because it wasn't that very big of a property. And I knew he was in there somewhere. And then I graphed it out into sections where I could see or hear everything that was within an area. And I went and I hunted each one of these. There's like 10 spots. And I kind of drew them. And when I drew this particular spot, which was a big open hardwoods, but it was surrounded by some thick stuff, I thought, oh man, I wanted to put it back and draw a different spot.
Right.
But I went there and I hunted it because that was the plan I had made. And I get there, and sure enough, this buck pops up and walks right in, and I kill him. And there was no sign in there. It wasn't some place where you'd think there'd be a deer. But what it was nobody would look at that and think there's a deer there. Nobody would hunt there. That's why he was there.
Yeah, so obvious, right?
Yeah.
Well, I think we're going to have Ashley come back on, and there she is. I got her back on. Let's see. Can we hear you, Ashley?
Can you hear me?
Oh, my God. We can even hear you. I think we got a winner. So before we get into questions, let's go ahead and announce the winner.
So the winner was W.I. Bowhunter.
So W.I. Bowhunter, you've got your
right on the head.
The number was 138, and he got the number exactly, and he was the first one to get the number. So congratulations. Email us at thehuntingbeastreport what item you want out of Dan's store and what size, and also your shipping address. So that's thehuntingbeastreport@gmail.com. Again, size, what item you want, shipping address, and I'll get that information to Dan, and he'll get you your T-shirt or hoodie or whatever he said. Anything in the store, right, Dan? DVD, whatever.
Yeah, I guess we could extend it to DVD.
Okay.
Sure.
So, yeah, I'm just
a DVD or a garment.
Yeah, I'm here to help Dan, just give Dan stuff away because it's not my stuff. So I just help give it away. Yeah, right, Dan? You sure you don't want to give away like 10 tree stands or something?
Nah, I think we'll stop there.
Okay, a DVD or a garment, T-shirt or hoodie. So congratulations, Wisconsin Bowhunter. And Ashley, what do we got for questions today?
All right, there was quite a few questions tonight. The first one is Zeke asking, Jeremy, what do you do for a living?
What do I do for a living? I don't know.
Male gigolo.
I can say I actually work for the government, so I'm in a procurement office. So I am not active duty, but I work for the Army as an Army civilian, buying stuff. And specifically, right now, I work out of Joint Base San Antonio, buying base operations support services. So any Army base, they've got they need building maintenance, landscaping, all sorts of service stuff. I work in an office that does the purchasing for that.
Nifty. We had a super chat, and it was Andrew Vandolski's 5th super chat. He said, any tips on Fort McCoy?
Fort McCoy. There's I think it's a ski hill. There's some really nice hilly stuff behind that that's pretty good. But I think some of the outskirts stuff is good, but you can just about hunt anywhere in there and get onto action, I think early season's nice when there isn't as much pressure.
I don't know if Andrew's seen the video, but you guys, didn't you do a hunt there once upon a time?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I was assuming that's what he was referring to.
Okay.
That's why he was asking, because he knew we had experience there. But yeah, if I went back, I didn't go in there and hunt, but I noticed some really nice hilly stuff behind that ski hill. And really steep stuff that kind of reminded me of, like Buffalo County, Wisconsin, or northeastern Iowa.
Right, like that bluff country type terrain.
Yeah, it was there's some pretty good stuff in there, in that area. But yeah, it's just a lot like everything else. What is nice is that you get an extra tag. You know, you don't have to use your Wisconsin tag.
Oh, nice.
Alrighty. Matthew Witchner said it's super dry in upper lower Michigan. Anybody else experiencing that? Deer activity is really slow compared to the past. I'm thinking it has to do with the dryness. What are your guys' thoughts?
I don't think the dryness is going to affect their activity. It might affect where the activity is. So he might not be seeing it where he's seen it in past years. And he's probably got to adapt. The dryness certainly is going to affect where they're at and what they're eating. I mean, the vegetation that they're eating is going to change. You know, they might be eating the same vegetation, but it might be in a different spot where it's closer to the water or something. And he's just going to probably have to regroup and re-scout. I mean, the deer aren't going to show up in the same spots every year. The food sources aren't going to grow in the same spots every year. You know, you got to kind of follow those deer around.
Yeah, Dan, I'll chime in real quick. I obviously used to live in Michigan, and I thought at times it was dry, but it's nothing like it is in Nebraska or Kansas or Montana. When you got a drought year, I mean, that's a whole nother level. So I think even on a dry Michigan year, and I've got a buddy that's a farmer there. He said they haven't got rain in like 15 days now or whatever. It's been quite a while. But even then, I think Dan hit the nail on the head. They're going to be maybe on alfalfa and stuff that's got more moisture, even though it is dry. So I'll be looking at the greener food sources for sure. Or, you know,
that's what a lot of people don't get about deer is that in a lot of places they're a long ways from water, and people will be like, well, where are they drinking? They're not.
Yeah,
they get their liquids right from the plants, believe it or not. Sure, when it's hot and they're dry, they'd like to get a drink, but they don't have to. They get a lot of that from their the vegetation, which is why stuff like jewelweed is so important to them, because that is just filled with water. You know, it's the plant itself is like 80% water. You know, that's why they like those types of plants. So if you get in low areas, there doesn't have to be water, but if you get to where it's low and still a little moist and it has those types of plants, deer are going to go there because of the liquid in the plants.
Yeah, and I don't know if Matthew's got any old abandoned apple orchards, which is a pretty common thing in Michigan, or fence rows, but I think you'd see him on stuff like that more early season too, like Dan said, and stinging nettle, that type of stuff, thistles that are a real watery stalk plant. I'd be looking for that kind of stuff.
Anything green.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Hookslinger said, any tips for October 1st openers like in Michigan as opposed to a mid-September opening like Wisconsin? What are the differences, and would your tactics stay the same?
For me, the tactics pretty much stay the same. It's just a matter of they're a little more nocturnal the 1st of October and a little harder. They just move a little further and they move a little easier in early September than they do in October. But the tactics really don't start changing until like you start getting to around the 15th of October or so, when it starts getting more rut phased. You know, it's just they get a little more nocturnal. They move a little later, don't go as far. You know, you can, like in September, you can be in a spot hunting a bedding area and kill a big buck that came from three or four different bedding areas away and walk through all those bedding areas to get to you and still shoot them in daylight. I mean, I'm seeing deer at, sometimes 5 PM, good bucks at this time of the year. In October, it's usually that last half an hour that you're getting your crack, that's the biggest difference, is just the timing of their moves. Obviously the foods change, the patterns change, where they're exactly at changes. One thing in early September, like right now, when I find rubs, I know I'm not far from that deer. They don't move a lot around this time of the year. If they're rubbing someplace right now, that's where they live. You find rubs in October, you really better be sure it's a fresh rub to know that deer's around. You know what I mean? Where if you find a rub a week ago, you can be pretty certain that that's a fresh rub, because their deer were in velvet not too long ago. As a matter of fact, we've still got some deer in velvet. I had a buck go underneath me a week ago that was still in full velvet, so they're just coming out of velvet, so those rubs give them away. But there really isn't a lot of difference in the tactics.
You got anything on that, Jeremy?
Michigan specifically, October 1st opener. Couple things. The youth hunt, it was like the last weekend. So people have already pressured, and then the last minute scouters. I always had good luck. Like with the September opener in Montana, I hunt some really obvious conservative, spots like right next to ag fields and stuff that I would never hunt in Michigan. Michigan, my best tip is get on some of your pressured bedding stuff right away, because between the youth hunt, people putting their cameras out, people illegal baiting, whatever, the woods are pretty stirred up. And I got friends that are good hunters that are running cameras that said in the last week their cameras have shut right off already. So get into some of your harder to access stuff early is probably my best tip.
Grant Henderson said, what do you think about portable Bale blinds for the night to get those morning deer in Nebraska?
I guess it could work. I haven't really tried it, but I would think that if you mix it in with the bales that are out there, and some of those fields have hundreds of those bales, it could probably work. It's a matter of whether or not those deer recognize it as a trap, or they know there wasn't a bale there before or something. I know, like Ricky likes to keep trying to use a pop-up blind, and those deer look at that and freak, even if he brushes it in. You know what I mean? So it's got to be somewhere where they're not, where they just kind of see it as, one of the other bales. But I think it could work. I think it has potential. I think having a blind like that up for a long time might even be more helpful.
Yeah.
But you certainly don't want to put it up a week before you're going to hunt, or a day before you're going to hunt, or something. I think the day of, or a long time in advance.
I think if you could work with the farmers and have them cut around the same time you put the blind out, it would be your best chance at it, because then all of them appear at the same time rather than just one new one.
Mm-hmm. When I used to write for Buckmasters, there was a guy they had me do a story about who shot back-to-back booners. He was a farmer, and he would take those round bales and he'd put them in a triangle and sit in the middle of them, and that was his blind. But he would go place those in certain areas with his front end loader during the summer, and then just leave them there, But he'd get those deer in those open fields doing that.
It's a good tactic. Out of the box thinking there. I like it.
Yeah. Work with what you have. Steve Denoyer asked, Dan, do you think the warm weather put a damper on the hunt, and would you choose a different time frame?
I don't think the warm weather put a damper on the hunt at all. Deer were moving. We saw a lot of deer. I like that time frame. I might choose a different time frame if I went again, just because Shane goes there every year, and I'm sure now Jacob will be going there every year. So I would rather not be there when all those spots are getting pressured,
Yeah.
But I don't think that that's a bad time frame, But there's other areas too. I mean, you don't have to be in that spot. There's all kinds of spots like that, across the country. I mean, a guy could go to, South Dakota or further west, near Jeremy. I mean, Jeremy's got spots just like we were hunting,
Pretty
it's
similar.
just a matter of
that
early season is good. So, that's summer pattern. I mean, that's the huge advantage of early season. That's why in Wisconsin we do so well opening week versus opening week of Michigan, which was what the last question or the one before that about October 1st versus our September opener. The biggest difference is our deer are still in that summer pattern. I mean, you drive around during the summer and you see big bucks out in open fields feeding, right? We still got a little bit of that going on in September. So that first week of September is really still summertime for those deer. That's they're in a whole different mindset. They don't even have that paranoia about them yet. And it isn't really that it's pressure. A lot of guys think it's pressure that gives them that paranoia. There's something about the timing. You even take those deer and you put them on a private ranch that doesn't get hunted. You see a whole different animal October 1st than you do September 1st. It's a whole different animal. There's something about the time. There's something that changes in them as the testosterone builds or whatever, and they become a paranoid, animal that's really their instincts starting to tune in towards October, but they don't have that in summer. Summertime in September-ish, fall, where the late summer, early fall period is, those deer are just, they're not the same. They move a lot in daylight. I mean, we were seeing them even on 100-degree days an hour before dark. Sun's still up,
I'm convinced they know the time frame and they can smell what it smells like, and they remember all of the noises from the year prior. I could be wrong, but I feel like they're very smart creatures.
Got good instinct.
Jay, I don't know what his other name is, but he said any news or update on the new beast stand or possibly beast sticks.
I don't want to give too much details on that. Mario and the boys are working pretty hard on that. Just be patient. It's being worked on.
Alrighty. Farrell asked if I have any good chili recipes. I will try and post as many deer meat recipes as I have on my Facebook page. So I'll try and type them up and make it to where y'all can look at them. And I don't measure anything. I do it all to taste. So y'all can guesstimate too. Because I don't.
Give for people that aren't already following you, what's your Facebook and or Instagram so people can find you?
It is Another Athlete Outdoors on both of them. And then Tim Crane said, why didn't Rick take a doe? Is he going to go back?
I told Rick to shoot whatever he wanted to shoot, and I know he loves venison and he likes stuff, and he just said big buck or nothing. That's Ricky. If that's what he wanted, that's what he wanted. I encouraged him to shoot something. But he didn't want to shoot anything small, and he didn't want to shoot a doe. And he did have a valid thing. I said, Ricky, nobody's going to fault you if you shoot a doe or something. And he said, Dan, it's 100 degrees out here. Then I got to deal with it. I'm like,
yeah.
Good point.
I've been told that a time or seven. Steve Denoir wants to know if there's any news on the unknown pooping trespasser.
Those guys, I do not believe have been back since the day they pooped.
Maybe
he had another crew there work one day, and I don't think they're the same crew. The camera's been there the whole time. They haven't been back. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to catch them. It's just
you gonna be all right, Ashley?
When you gotta go, I guess. I'm not fine.
Yeah, but you don't have to go in my yard. You know what the best part of that whole video was the comments.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of them got removed, so you didn't see them. But there was literally one guy sent his belligerent comment like, "I am so done with your channel. I'm never going to watch again because you deleted my post or my comment." And I replied to him and I said, "Leave if you want, but I didn't delete anything. You probably put something so offensive YouTube removed it." So then he reposted, and it was that the Indians claim we don't own the land, and that nobody owns the land, so I should not be able to tell anybody they should stay off my land and not poop on my land. What kind of Nazi am I to think I own the land? And I wanted to, but I just refrained myself. But I really wanted to answer. It was like, yeah, but they had territories, didn't they? And if you went in their territory and they didn't like you, they buried you up to your neck in ants. It's like, okay, they said nobody owned the land because they're a clan. You know what I mean? And nobody in their group owned anything, right? It was all everybody's, right? Didn't mean it was outsiders owned it. I mean, I would like to have seen some cowboy drive in there, park his horse, walk up to the chief's tent, and poop where his kids play. It ain't happening. It ain't happening.
Yeah, he wouldn't
work
be
out
happy
well, right? So the guy's argument didn't work, but there's so many crazy arguments in there. And there's one like, why do you get so angry about people pooping? I wasn't angry. I was going to catch him and show him the pictures and be like, why are you pooping in my yard?
Kick a hole at
missed
least.
This whole situation somehow. Like, I have homework to do because I missed all of this. Do we have enough time for another question, Jeremy?
Yeah, we got a couple more minutes, 5 or 10 more minutes.
Okay. Hunter615 said, what habit makes a buck use one bedding area versus a buck that runs circuits with no bedding area?
All bucks have bedding areas, so they all return to bedding areas. But none of them have one bedding area. There isn't a buck that beds in the same spot every day. That doesn't happen. If it did, we'd kill them with no problem. But some deer have large circuits that they go around and bed in different areas. And you got to figure out the timing. And some of them stay in tight areas. And that's just, it's like people. Some people drive all over the place, live all over the place. Some people are homebodies. You know, with people, it's a little more specific because we got kind of locked in and roped into this government way of thinking of we work for a living and we have to have a house and a family and a wife and stuff. But deer don't have that. So some of them are the kind that stay in a little tight area. I mean, I've hunted the same woods and have one buck that I hunt never leave an area, to my knowledge, that's outside of a square mile. And I've had other deer in that same exact area that one day you see it 5 miles from there, one day it's back again, one day you see it 5 miles over there. And studies show that there's two distinct types of deer, and about 1 out of 3 deer have multiple home ranges. And those are generally the travelers. And there'll be a time frame when they travel, but they come back and they use the same beds again. And it's with timing. Like if you get a picture of a deer in an area at a time, if he's alive next year, he's probably going to be in that same area at the same time frame. And it's almost a day. It's uncanny. And we've seen this for years with trail cameras. And then when we brought it up to Dr. Strickland, he said that he was seeing the exact same thing with radio collar studies. So don't get roped into the whole they don't use the same bedding areas. It's harder to hunt some deer. It's harder to figure out the patterns with some deer, but there are patterns and there are, repetitive things they do. And if they didn't, I wouldn't have the wall that I have.
Well, and there's so many other people, not just you, that talk about historical data and how important it is. Like, it's a very, it doesn't matter what you guys think or whether you guys get along on different tactics and stuff. You guys all agree on one thing, and it's historical data.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to say something about how well it works. I think other than another poop question, that was about it for the questions.
Okay. Well, we can wrap up there. We're at 1 hour and 20 minutes anyway. So, Dan, I'll get you that information for Wisconsin bow hunter. And then what about next week? I think we've got a guest lined up. I did talk to that person you told me to talk to. So as long as you're available next week, Dan, I think we'll be back next week. Same time, same channel. Oh, so everybody else is aware too. Dan, last year we moved the show back during season. We moved it back to an hour later start time. I wanted to ask you about that. Might as well ask you here. Do you want to do that again this year? Yes or no?
I was just about to bring that up as soon as you stopped talking. Yeah, I would like to make this 8 o'clock if that's okay for both of you.
It should be okay. I should be able to get the little one in bed by that time then, because it'll be 9 o'clock for me.
Yeah, that allows me time to hunt, or Jeremy time to hunt. And also a big part of our viewers are Wisconsin and Michigan, and they're hunting in the time frame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not getting back home in time to watch this or back to their car until after it started. 8 o'clock will give them a little more time.
Yeah. So starting next week, will probably be, it might be the week after that. I got to double check with the guests, but it'll either be 7 or 8 Central next week. And then going forward, it'll be 8 Central till the end of the season. Then we'll switch it back, in December or whatever. So, all right.
Awesome.
Well, thanks everybody for tuning in. I noticed I had a lot of members in the chat tonight, so thanks again to all the members. The support is helping make this show possible on a weekly basis. I know we did miss a week or two there because Dan was traveling and I was traveling as well. And I want to thank Ashley again, as always, for fielding all the questions and helping out with the drawing. It's been a big help. So, Dan, you got anything you want to close on?
Yeah, I was going to say that I'm going to take the raw footage from me and the raw footage from Ricky and the raw footage from Eric, and I'm just going to rough edit it to make it so it's not impossible to watch. But I'm going to put standalone clips on the private channel, so you get to see everything that happened in Nebraska, not just the stuff that made the show.
Sure.
And I also have several hunts that are backed up because of how late it got with putting Nebraska together. So expect some new shows to be coming up. We got a couple bear shows, a couple deer shows coming. Some stuff we've been holding back on you on.
Are those going to be main channel, private channel, or a mix?
Main channel. Mm-hmm. I may put some of my hunts on the private channel, just because I don't know if they're worthy of the main channel, but they're good learning tools. And I think the guys that are on the private channel more appreciate that stuff.
Yeah, I'd agree. All right, well, folks, that's going to do it for today. Dan, good to get caught up. Ashley, good to see you again. And next week, we'll be back with a guest and kind of a crazy story. Well,
see you guys.
See everybody then.